Hello and welcome to 24 Lives Per Second, Guernsey's fortnightly-ish film podcast. This is episode 14, Brave Words. My name is Winter Tyson, and following the news that Videodrome may be up for the remake treatment and the imminent UK release of Total Recall, I've officially resigned myself to the fact that Ashton Kutcher and James Corden will soon be tipped to play the Blues Brothers. Anyway, with me as usual are Claire Mockett.
Hello.
And Russ Galloway.
Hi.
And this week we will be reviewing Disney Pixar's Brave and the Bourne Legacy before turning our eyes on some new home video releases and some other random movies that we've encountered over the past couple of weeks, but not Battleship, because we haven't got the time or the energy to revisit that floating piece of... Anyway, moving on. First up is Brave. Set in Scotland in a rugged and mythical time, Brave features Merida, an aspiring archer and impetuous daughter of royalty. Merida makes a reckless choice that unleashes unintentional peril and forces her to spring into action to set things right. Now, that was the official Disney description of it, if you couldn't tell, and it sounds pretty good, so here's the trailer.
I saw something that day, something I'll not forget. It stands 12 feet tall, with razor-sharp claws. His hide littered with the weapons of fallen warriors. His face scarred with one dead eye. I drew my sword and...
Chomp! Dad's leg was clean off!
Oh, that's my favourite part.
In accordance with our laws, the firstborn of each of the great leaders must prove their worth. Merida, stop! A lady enjoys elegant pursuits.
I present my only son. He took out a whole armada single-handedly. He was... With one arm, he was steering the ship...
I want my freedom!
But are you willing to pay the price your freedom will cost?
Careful what you wish for, my mother would say.
What's the worst that could happen? Yeah! No more fighting! Show a little decorum!
Feast your eyes!
If you had the chance to change your fate, would you?
So I'm hoping to see this one later on this week. Claire, is this worth checking out?
Well, first of all, massive fan of Pixar. I think I've pretty much seen every film of Pixar, so high expectations of Brave. It's kind of, you don't really want to go into a film with high expectations, but with all the history of Pixar, you can't help it. Absolutely stunning film. The graphics are just absolutely flawless. The way that they've developed visually the setting is, just absolutely mind-blowing and stunning. You couldn't ask for more visually. Story-wise, a little bit thin on the ground. It's something that I felt a little bit disappointed about, because obviously it's 1 hour 33 minutes, so it's compared to a lot of films these days, like I think Toy Story was 1 hour 45 minutes or something, and this film really needed that extra time to just develop the characters a little bit more. It followed the main character. She was never off screen, I think, only for a few moments, so it was very much fixed on her. And her relationship with her family, particularly her mother. But yeah, there was no other real character development for me. Spoiler alert, but the mother at some point turns into a bear, and so you're slightly removed from her as a character because you now see her as a bear. And I think that was, for me, the biggest, even though it was a massive plot point for the film, it was a massive plot flaw, because the relationship that you have while watching the characters kind of dispersed a bit. and so you kind of lost the tempo and the rhythm got lost in the storytelling. But apart from that, it looked fantastic.
So you just mentioned someone being turned into a bear.
Yeah.
Which I think is... I got that impression from the adverts anyway, to be honest. So is this Lords of the Ringsy, or is it more sort of Camelot-y, that kind of magic?
I saw a lot of Avatar, kind of.
Oh, right,
in the spirituality of the film, there was a lot of Avatar, like being touched with, being one with nature. There's a little bit of this Scottish mythology without there being real Scottish mythology, kind of Celtic feel to it. So it touched on kind of a lot of issues. Mainly, most of it was feminism. I related most of the film towards feminism and a girl's rite of passage. So that in itself brought various things like journeys, Lord of the Rings kind of style thing. So yeah, it touched a lot of themes from a lot of previous films that you didn't really want to go, oh, that reminds me of this, that reminds me of that. But unfortunately, the story led to you thinking, oh, this reminds me of that scene in that other film. And especially some of the dialogue as well kind of is very formulaic, as we spoke about. But all in all, yeah, definitely enjoyed it. But I just wanted the story just to develop a little bit richer. What did you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, Claire. I agree that it's, as you expect from Pixar, it's an extremely beautiful film. It's stunning. I was sat there in the cinema watching it kind of mouth open for quite a lot, especially the first kind of 45 minutes. It is beautiful, beautiful stuff that they've created. In particular, Marida's hair, her kind of ginger hair.
Fantastic.
It's the same as kind of was it Sully's hair in Monsters Inc?
Yes.
I remember kind of
Yeah.
sitting watching that and being like, how have you done that? And I did lose like 30 seconds here and there just looking at the hair, which is, I mean, it's amazing. It is so beautifully rendered. It's unbelievable, and it's just so ginger and just vibrant. It obviously sticks out against all the greens and everything. So it was quite special. we enough about the hair. It was just cool. I think a lot has been made of kind of how this is Pixar's most like Disney-ified film that they've done so far, and like Claire said, it is quite a standard fairy tale narrative. It's very simple, and kind of unlike things like Toy Story and maybe The Incredibles, there's not that kind of hidden depth to the story or to the narrative that adults would get and kids wouldn't. It's basically you see what you see is what you get, and kind of if you know fairy stories, you pretty much know how it's going to pan out, and there's not a huge amount of surprise. They've done well to kind of keep in that element of peril. It was still at times go, oh, that's a bit close and that, but it just didn't have that kind of depth that you might expect from a normal kind of Pixar effort. I mean, there was, in terms of being a good old-fashioned fairy story, it's got that family-orientated part at its centre. I mean, for me, there wasn't anything wrong with that. I think the thing you get with Pixar is that they can be victims of their own success in that where they kind of go to such heights, and so their films are so brilliantly put together. But I think if this is supposed to be their below par effort, then they're pretty much doing okay, because I still really enjoyed it. Sat in the cinema for, like you said, about 90 minutes and kind of didn't have a single problem with it. Didn't look at my watch once. It kind of just kind of breezed over me. And I think Claire's right as well when talks about it being it is quite a feminist movie. I think all of the male characters in it are portrayed as kind of oafish and stupid Scottish guys, always just fighting over stuff when they should be talking, kind of sorting things out. And to be honest with you, there's a clan in it called the MacGuffins. For me, that kind of just topped it all off nicely with a cherry on top. So I really enjoyed it. I mean, I know it's at the Mallard for the next week at least. And it's one of those things that I would definitely say, if you can catch it at the cinema, do it, because although those graphics might look great on your high def 40-inch TV, it's still going to look even better up on that screen at the Mallard. So yeah, I'd thoroughly recommend it.
So where does it sit, sort of amidst the sort of the Pixar list? Is it one of the? I mean, there's been talk of it being a bit of a subpar Pixar.
Yeah.
If such a thing's really a problem.
I mean, I'm not a Pixar. I don't know. I don't fawn over Pixar. I don't. They're not like. I don't think. I'm not a big kind of Toy Story should win Oscars for best film and things like that. I don't necessarily prescribe to that. I think they're good. They're funny. They work on a lot of levels. But I don't think they're the best films ever made. Things like WALL-E are quite special because they try to do something different, and I like that kind of approach that they take to it. But it's a good funny movie. It's a good Sunday afternoon, Saturday matinee. If you had kids, you take the kids with it, and it's really great. It's really funny. It's really charming. It looks great, and you know, it's better than a lot of other films out there that are made. You know, proper, you know, reality films, if you would. But yeah, no, I don't know where it sits. I preferred The Incredibles. I probably preferred some Toy Stories, but you know, I don't like Cars, so it's better than Cars. You know, and so it kind of it fits in there really for me.
Okay.
I think for me, the probably sits in between Up and Cars. It was visually, it's probably the best film, but for story wise, it's just above Up. I thought Up was. I didn't really enjoy that film at all, apart from the first 15 minutes.
You didn't like Up?
No, I did. I
think it faded.
It definitely faded.
I agree.
I think one of the problems with Pixar films is generally that the first half hour
normally
is
amazing.
usually cracking, and then I mean Up was good, but it really lost. I mean, Talking Dogs and all that stuff really lost it. Wall-E was brilliant.
That was
and
a fantastic film.
Kind of trailed off. But
Yeah.
I mean, does Brave do that, or does
in a
it
way,
just?
I mean, certainly, I felt the first 30 to 40 minutes were excellent.
Yeah.
Really, really good until you know where it's going. Until you realise, okay, there is going to be a witch, there is going to be a spell, there is going to be this. And so you do kind of then suddenly fall into kind of a beat. Because obviously it starts with this strong young heroine who's you know, you wouldn't normally see, and she's standing up to everyone, and she's skillful at bow and arrows and riding horses, and she's a really great character. And they don't throw that away by any means, but they then just put her into that formulaic story as opposed to taking her off in kind of a different direction. So yeah, maybe that is a problem we have with Pixar, but yeah, they're supposedly not so good stuff is still better than a hell of a lot of other stuff that I've seen.
And so on a similar theme, just one last question about Brave. Is there a short before it?
Yes.
Is that good? Is it the usual
short,
kind of brilliant?
It's short. The short before it actually has, story-wise, better reviews than the actual film the ones I've read.
I'd forgotten. The short before it is actually excellent. I thought it's beautiful in everything, in its narrative, in the way it looks, in the final moment when you see where they're going with it. And I actually sat in cinema myself and went, oh.
I think everyone had a massive...
Because it's lovely. Moment. It's so sweet. Yeah, it is. So you would always want to go and see it for that alone, because that is quite special.
But I think with Pixar or any kind of films, it is... to buy the Blu-rays, I think that we'll get the extra footage that I think they cut away from this film. I'm not saying that there'll definitely be extra footage, but it felt like with Brave, it was cut so much to fit in that time. So hopefully we'll get some more film if we look at the Blu-ray.
Oh, fantastic. And Brave is currently playing at the Mallard Cinema, and to be honest, it looks like a solid recommendation. And also playing at the Mallard is the Bourne Legacy. This film follows Agent Aaron Cross as he tries to avoid the deadly fallout of the events of the Bourne Ultimatum.
What's your name? Kenneth Gibson. Will you give yourself to this program? Yes, sir.
There is nothing that you wouldn't do for this country. You have the strength to do what's necessary.
How is he?
He's cramped.
Oh, that has healed well.
What do you think that we do out there, Doc?
Jason Bourne was the tip of the iceberg.
It's Aaron Cross. We have never seen evaluations like this. He's Treadstone without the inconsistency.
I've never met anybody in the program.
So how many of us are there?
You ask too many questions.
Jason Bourne is in Manhattan.
Confirmed.
What?
That's all I have. Gotta go.
People, listen up. This is a national security emergency.
The FBI is investigating links between Treadstone and this man, Jason Bourne.
I go down for this, Mark. You were given a Ferrari, and your people treated it like a lawnmower.
You're asking me to wipe the most valuable assets we've ever put in the field.
You're gonna start to consider the magnitude of what we're facing if this moves sideways on us? Meaning what? Meaning we will burn the program to the ground.
Hey, look, it's me.
because I want to live.
You think that Jason Bourne was the whole story? There's a lot more going on here.
You've had alterations to 2 different chromosomes. It's the most exciting development in the history of the science.
Well, I'm not just a science project, pal. I gave them everything. We both did.
Now, I'm the only one who's seen this, and to be honest, I think you should both save yourselves the effort. I mean, Legacy has none of the wit or invention of the original films, and the action doesn't really go anywhere either. I mean, I mentioned just before we started the podcast, I've been rewatching the original trilogy, and I think if those Bourne films came out now, you'd be thinking, oh, this is something different, this is something new. I mean, they are that good, and they are that much fun, which, you know, at the end of the day, it's a real shame that Legacy is just so boring, essentially, because it's not really about anything, to be honest. It's sort of, it's one of those films that has a lot going on, but sort of beyond that, it doesn't really mean much to characters. Not as interesting as the Bourne character, and it's a real shame because, like I said, I mean, the originals are one of the few recent trilogies that actually justify being 3 films worth of stuff, because there's a hell of a lot in them. They'll probably make more of these, to be honest, but I don't think I'll go and see the 5th one. I think it was quite a while ago, Matt Damon was interviewed and he sort of poo-pooed the whole idea of it, and to be honest, I think he was right. So I wouldn't recommend you go and see Bourne Legacy. I'd recommend pick it up when it comes out on DVD, have a look. You might enjoy it a bit more for a sort of and that's the problem. This is the problem with it. You might enjoy it a bit more if you're not really concentrating and kind of, you know, just want to watch an action movie, because that's all it is, which the others were so much more.
Is it filmed in the same style? Is it, you know, fast cuts all over the place, handheld camera work?
Yeah,
or not?
pretty much. And it's written and directed by Tony Gilroy, who wrote the originals. And he made Michael Clayton, which is also, I think it's a pretty smart film.
Yeah, very good.
Not as good as some say, I don't think. But you do kind of get the impression it's kind of one of those films where they've gone, this is how Bourne is, so let's do this. Which, annoyingly, is what a lot of action movies have already done, including
they're not the first there, are they?
So on. So it just seems a bit like they've turned up a bit late to that particular party, as it were. But I'd say I wouldn't recommend it, but I am really looking forward to The Brave, and I think now it's time we moved our attention to what we've been watching at home. And now we reach the point of the podcast where we take a look at the films we've been watching on the small screen. Russ, if you want to start us off, I understand you've been watching The Raven.
Yes.
What is it? What's going on?
Oh, The Raven. Raven is set in Baltimore in the 1800s. Murders are happening inspired by the works of Edgar Allan Poe. And these murders baffle the authorities. So there's a local police detective who consults Poe himself, who is in this narrative as a real person.
And is he in it as an author or?
Yes.
Yeah, right,
he is.
okay, cool.
He is in it as Edgar Allan Poe, as the historical figure that we know. And so obviously these murders are, seem to be mimicking some of his stories from his earlier books. So almost in a Basic Instinct way, he starts off as being a suspect, but then kind of, comes back into, and then it's suddenly realised that Poe's girlfriend, played by Alice Eve, is abducted, and then the killer challenges Poe to solve clues that he leaves, based around his stories and so on and so forth around it, and hilarity ensues. First, I mean, it's pretty dull, if I'm honest with you. Okay. It's a shame because I thought this might be quite a neat little Saturday night thriller that I'm gonna quite enjoy, but it just never really got going for me. And John Cusack, who I find is kind of usually always watchable, no matter kind of what he's in, no matter what he's doing, he's always there. He didn't seem to be the right fit for me. It seemed a bit incongruous for him to be in this film, kind of playing this part, because his slightly OTT kind of wide-eyed style, like kind of toned down Nick Cage in a way. Just kind of, it just didn't quite feel right with the mood. It's supposed to be quite a gothic kind of thriller horror type film, and it just didn't kind of match for me. And I think in a way that kind of goes for the whole film. It's trying to be this gothic thriller, but there's a lightness to the scenes where kind of the exposition is happening, which doesn't really match up to the really quite violent murder scenes. And if that's what they were going for, then fine. Just for me, it didn't quite match together, and it just came across as very disjointed and quite strange. The biggest problem I had with it was that there was just no thrill. There was no peril, if you like. We love the word peril.
We love peril.
And although Brave had mild peril,
yes.
The Raven, there was really no peril there, because I didn't really care about any of them. I didn't care about any of the characters. It's not a particularly well fleshed out piece. And Cusack's Edgar Allan Poe seems to have a very high opinion of himself, and therefore comes across as just a bit arrogant and just a bit of an idiot. And so you don't really want him to succeed. And plus, it's got a very odd framing narrative device, which kind of, obviously, if you're sat up and taking note, you'll realise how it's going to end anyway. So that always can either work for you or it can't. And I won't kind of talk about it, but you'll know within the first 30 seconds whether it's going to work for you or whether it isn't. Stylistically, it looked okay, but the kind of gothic elements of it only really serves to remind me of those better films that have done it in a better way. Films like Sleepy Hollow or even like From Hell. And although I don't think From Hell is a particularly brilliant film, I think what it did really well is that it was grubby and it was dirty, and it kind of put you in that Victorian London, which this in a way is trying to ape with its 17th century Boston. And so you had that feel of kind of griminess, and just everyone was always dirty, and kind of, and it just created an atmosphere that kind of made those Jack the Ripper killings a bit more visceral and kind of thrilling to watch. And to be honest, that kind of approach would have made The Raven a bit better, but they didn't execute it well enough for me. So if it's on telly, on Film 4 one night maybe, or if it's going to be on, it might be worth a watch, but there's not much there to recommend. It's pretty surface level. There's no real depth to it or anything.
Yeah, see, I find John Cusack, he's one of those funny actors where he is brilliant, and like you said, I mean, if something's got John Cusack in, I'll tend to go, right, I've got to watch that. But he is the most depressing actor to watch in a role that doesn't suit him. Because he's one of those guys who think, brilliant, John Cusack, and then you watch these terrible films and you go, oh, John Cusack. Do you know what I mean, though?
Yeah, totally.
He's a bit like, it's like Nick Cage, because when Nick Cage is going to be good, he's going to be brilliant.
He's going to be excellent.
But Cusack especially, I find when the film, like, I watched Hot Tub Time Machine the other week.
Yeah,
and
see that. Yeah.
I mean, as funny as bits of that were, I was kind of sat there thinking, oh, John Cusack, when are we going to have some more Grosse Pointe Blank?
Grosse Pointe Blank, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what he needs. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He needs that. It's in the like those two films kind of almost work perfectly as a demonstration that Hot Tub Time Machine is not his type of film. He is not teen comedy American Pie type stuff, and he's not dark gothic thriller. He's Grosse Pointe Blank, dark comedy. He's very good at that kind of dark black comedy stuff, because it allows him to go off the reins a bit, but kind of still keep something back. And this was just, he was going all out for it. It just didn't really. We needed someone with a bit more restraint to kind of come in and work it, I think.
Okay, and Claire, you've also been watching some crap this week.
Yes.
What have you been watching?
I've caught up finally with a few films I wanted to watch from last year. One of them particularly, anything with Jodie Foster, and I'm going to watch because she's a talented actress. So I watched The Beaver with Mel Gibson and Jodie Foster.
Now, is this the hand puppet?
This is the hand puppet film, the one that came out just after Mel Gibson's Breakdown, I think. So so maybe that was a marketing ploy for this film. But it's typical. I got a quick synopsis here. If it's about Walter Black, who's played by Mel Gibson, is depressed and sleeps most of the day. It's driving everybody absolutely crazy, and eventually his wife, played by Jodie Foster, kicks him out. He then starts carrying a beaver puppet that he found in the trash one day. He tries to commit suicide but fails, and then he starts to use the puppet as his way to communicate with his family and with the world, and begins to build his life up again. But then obviously, he's using a puppet to build his life up. It's not going to last very long. So it's this kind of roller coaster ride of this guy's life. It ends up okay, I guess, but the ending's pretty weird. It turns into a really random fight scene with him and his hand, basically the puppets on his hand, and they have a fight scene. It just goes a bit weird and a bit surreal. You can a film about mental illness, or about depression, or sometimes it's, you don't know whether someone's taking it to a comedy point, or saying, let's make light of something quite serious. But I think this film really failed to actually produce anything that's kind of like you took away thought, thinking, that was a really interesting point they made. I just felt like this film was failed. The reviews on it that I've read, people quite average reviews and stuff, but I'm just getting really disappointed with Jodie Foster. I don't know how other people feel, but I really enjoy the films where she is really allowed to develop her characters, and Silence of the Lambs, one of my favourite films. She's played some really random parts. I think she was in Flight Plan. That's the last decent film I think I've seen with her in. Originally it was supposed to be a man to play that role, right, okay. But it ended up being her. And so since then I just haven't seen anything that's really good. She's tend to be into these family dramas with some kind of real surreal plot points to them, and they're just not making sense. I mean, Carnage for me it should have been a really good film, but we talked about Carnage a few weeks ago, and I think ever since seeing that, it's kind of really made me think, actually, where is that kind of real amazing actress that we used to see? And it's just going off into these really random family dramas. So hopefully I do want to see something come out of something else that she's doing that's going to be really good. Yeah. I feel really bad by saying that.
Have you seen a good film this last couple of weeks?
Yes. Do
you want to just hold that forward? And what we'll do, we'll use that as a nice way to end the podcast.
Okay.
Because I've seen a shocker. Now, you've seen Bel Ami.
Yep.
Our Pats. What's that about?
Okay, Bel Ami. Our Pats. Well, no, let's not be mean. Robert Pattinson, we'll call him. He plays a character called Georges Drouat. It's French, obviously. Yeah, he's a poor ex-soldier who enters the world of Parisian society under the wing of an old friend, Charles Forestier, played strangely by Philip Glenister. I don't know since when he made the leap into film.
Right,
but I was quite surprised today. He's very good. He was fun. When Forestier secures him an introduction to society, he soon makes the acquaintance of all its ladies, including his wife, Madame Forestier, played by Uma Thurman, Virginie Walters, played by Kristen Scott Thomas, and Clotilde de Marelle, played by Christina Ricci, and proceeds to hump his way to the top, as I put it, basically. That's how it goes. Yeah, so that's kind of a rough synopsis of what happens, but quite accurate at the same time. I like Robert Pattinson. I think I've said before. I think he's.
I've got nothing against him.
No, I think he's a good actor, and I think one day he could become a great one. I think he's got the possibility to really become a really fine actor. So I've got no problem sitting and watching this film. My wife kind of chose it to go and watch it, and I was like, I'll put that on. That's no problem. It's nothing special. But it did serve as a kind of a good distraction for 90 minutes. It's kind of aiming for a Dangerous Liaisons type vibe with kind of French upper classes doing things they shouldn't. But to be honest, it's all a bit too kind of clean cut and pretty to really pull off anything interesting. The female actors do the best work. It's a great performance from Uma Thurman, and to be honest, the kind of not usually my cup of tea, Christina Ricci. I've never really thought she's great or brilliant in anything I've seen her in, but she was quite good in this. But the kind of performance of the film for me was kind of always dependable Kristen Scott Thomas, who kind of walks away with kind of the best performance from quite a small role as the wife of Robert Pattinson's boss, who kind of once ensnared into his web kind of turns into this really desperate and kind of fawning older woman who can't let go of kind of this little bit of romance she's kind of rekindled. So that was very good. Like I said, it's by no means a terrible film. I think the fact that I enjoyed it more than I expected to doesn't mean I'd recommend it to everyone and say it's fantastic to go and watch. But surprisingly, if you told me that I was going to prefer Bel Ami to The Raven a week ago, then I would have told you to go home. But I did. The more I talk about it, the more I think about it. Do you know what? It wasn't bad. It didn't get great reviews. There was quite a lot of Twilight staring at the camera.
But there's quite a bit of sniffiness around.
Yeah,
Robert
well, I think there is, and I think as well, period drama as well. It was never going to capture the imagination of a lot of people. But a good, solid piece of work, well directed, a nice couple of kind of plot twists, not too heavy-handed, and an ending that doesn't cop out. In all honesty, it certainly doesn't tie itself all up neatly with a bow and happily ever after at the end as well, which I always like. I'm always a fan of. So yeah, Bel Ami. If you like Robert Pattinson, then certainly watch it. And if you don't like The Raven, then watch it as well.
Okay, well, I've got two. Before we get to sort of a final film, I've got two very quick ones. I saw The Vow, which is Channing Tatum and Rachel McAdams. So it's apparently based on a true story-ish, sort of, it sounds like one of those dreadful stories, one of those dreadful, my dad haunted the trousers and raped me kind of magazines, those horrible Now magazines. And what happens is she's in a crash and she loses her memory, but she loses the memory of him and their wedding. And you know what? It was quite good. It's one of those romantic comedies. I mean, the thing I like about romantic comedies is there's sort of a lot of genres sort of fall in and out of fashion stuff, but the romance films are always there. And you know what? They're usually pretty good. They're usually quite watchable. But this one, and the reason I quite liked this one was because it didn't go down the route of the sort of dishonest route a lot of them go down. So there is that other guy from her old life who's loitering around, but it doesn't go down the route of setting people up just to bring them down or reveal them as bastards. And I'm not spoiling anything here, because you know what's happening from the first frame of this film. But I thought, they've got a good chemistry together. They live in a sort of a really beautiful loft. She's an artist.
Course.
He's like he's a independent music producer. These lovely jobs these people have. But it's one of those films you can just sit and watch and sort of get a bit lost in. And you know what? It's quite good. The other film I saw, very different, but another sort of genre film, was Act of Valour, which is... It's a film about Navy SEALs and sort of special ops kind of guys, except they're played by serving Navy SEALs and special ops guys. And the whole film seems to sort of be hinged on the fact that, hey, these guys are the guys who do it. This is the real deal. But you know what? The film told me nothing about what it's like to be a Navy SEAL. It told me nothing about how these operations worked. There's no substance.
Just showed them blowing stuff
and
up.
You kind of got the impression that the whole point of making it is because we can get these guys and, well, God damn it, respect them and respect the film, as if it makes the film more worthy, and it doesn't. And I think one of the things is, actors do something. Actors don't just pretend to be people. They illuminate how people are. So when you watch someone act, you can tell they're acting, but it's that very sort of... that very falseness and step away from reality that gives you insights into characters. And when you've got people in it who just can't act, it's not good enough that they're just the people, the real people. I'm sure it gave a nice little boost to the film to have these guys in it, because they probably got access to a shed load of equipment, and there's loads of it. Obviously the budget is was taken well beyond sort of the film's quite meagre means. I mean, one thing I will say about it is when it came out, if you go on Internet Movie Database, there's quite a lot of thing about how disgusting it is that it's propaganda, and how disgusting it is that you're glorifying the military. I'm sorry, if you liked The Avengers, you enjoyed a really good propaganda film for US interventionism around the world. All that kind of stuff. So I think that kind of
just
stuff doesn't hold
wrapped
water.
up in a bow.
I just kind of thought, you know what, if they'd have got someone like Michael Mann to make a film about special ops, you'd have learned something really interesting, even just about the technicalities of it, if they'd have got actors to play the roles. And what is the point of getting these real guys in if you're just going to have them go, hey, you know what, we're having a baby. Oh man, well, let's just go on this mission and I hope, fingers crossed, everything. If you're just going to do the same clunky kind of rubbish, what's the point? But I really wouldn't recommend Act of Valour. A lot of people are saying it's the real thing because they're the real guys, but it's not how... Werner Herzog has this really great quote about sort of cinema verite, and he says the problem with cinema verite, it's you're just recording what's there. It's the accountant's truth, when what you really want is the ecstatic truth, because that will tell you something about it. And I think this film just needed more fiction to get closer to reality. Oh, that's pretentious, isn't it?
It's good, though. It's good. That's what this podcast needs.
Claire, please tell us about a good film and move us away from this pretension.
Full Metal Jacket. Yay! I don't know why I revisited this film. It's kind of one of those things that, because we don't have Sky or anything, nothing on TV, just thought, let's watch a good film, because I've been watching quite a lot of films, just catching up with things, and finally it said, have you seen this? No, I haven't. Well, we're going to watch it. And so it's just fantastic. If if you haven't seen it, I'm surprised if people haven't seen it, to be honest, because it is, if you're into films, Stanley Kubrick, then you're more likely going to see it. Plot summary, it's a film of 2 acts. The first act being set in a training camp, people preparing, I think they're volunteers, preparing to go to Vietnam. So you have a full-on, it's just shouting by a drill sergeant who was actually a real drill sergeant in real life.
That's where that works in Full Metal Jacket.
Yes.
Sorry,
no. When you were saying about this film,
surround people with actors. That does work. Like you said, pick someone for their specialty,
exactly.
what they do, and surround them by talented people. Then it works.
And he was also used in Toy Story. Just to...
Of course, he does essentially play. I think
a drill sergeant.
It's a drill
7,
sergeant.
he stretches himself and he's like the chief of police. But here
but it's basically for the first half of the film, it's him shouting at these recruits. There's lots of school of thoughts of what this film is about. One of my favourites isn't the backdrop is eventually Vietnam and the way that these soldiers are trained, but they're trained to kill. It's mostly about their mind, how they are then moulded from being a normal human being developed by society, put into boot camp, then put into Vietnam, and then eventually by the end of the film he does something, he shoots a woman sniper, and everyone says, man, that's deep, that's dark, that's really there. And I think it's the pinnacle of the film, but the whole film shows that journey from a man turning into somebody who's now a machine. But most of it's shot in England. I think Stanley Kubrick made this film after 6 years hiatus, so he came to this film with obviously quite eager to get back into making some bloody good cinema. Some of it's quite disturbing. There's a lot of different themes throughout the film. If you're into Platoon, if you're into Apocalypse Now, this film is definitely one of the films to watch with regards to war and a film about men and society and military.
Brilliant.
What do you guys feel about this film?
I love it. I mean, it's an odd film. It's less. I sometimes think it's less a film about war than it is a film about how we about images of war, because it's such a beautifully made film, and I love sort of the 4:3 sort of presentation of it is gorgeous and all. But I find it very strange that it's got that real disconnect of, we're going to break these guys down, we're going to build them back up again into fighting machines. Then you get there, and they're all essentially the people they were right at the start.
Yes.
Except you're able to suddenly just do stuff like shoot someone. Of course, you've got the character of the Animal Mother, who's just completely broken by and the gunner in the helicopter.
Oh yeah, get
mental.
some, and this guy's vomiting in the background because he's just too much. There's so many scenes like that actually you actually feel, oh my god, they're actually just going for it because they have nothing left. They're just there to shoot people. It reminds me of some of the stuff with Jarhead. They tried to touch on some of that with Jarhead, that came out a couple of years ago, and it didn't. That film, if you watch Full Metal Jacket and watch Jarhead, I think was trying to be a film similar to what Kubrick was doing, but with this set of Iraq and Afghanistan and more up to date, kind of where, I don't want to say where we are in society now, but to try and give you a glimpse of what it's like to be a soldier in those times. But I still think that Full Metal Jacket does a lot more to get an understanding of how people react to situations in war and their desperation to not become that machine, because they must be aware that I'm turning into this other person. So that some of the conversations that they have in the camp in Full Metal Jacket are kind of, he's wearing a peace badge and says "Born to Kill" on his helmet. There's a lot of, is very oxymoronic and someone points that out, and has always pointed out throughout his time there. So it's just full of, when you watch it again, like, I don't know how many times I've watched it now, but there's always things to see again, and there's always, oh yeah, I didn't realise that before.
Yeah,
so.
And it's one of those odd films, isn't it? But it's very much, it's a film you can take sort of both ways, because it's this very serious sort of study of war and sort of the aesthetic of war and the soul of man and all this stuff. But it's one of those films that if people can quote Commando and Predator, they can also quote Full Metal Jacket, and they're people who wouldn't normally be into sort of Kubrick and whatnot. It's kind of a film that covers sort of all bases in that respect. I love it. I love Full Metal Jacket. I think it's one of the great one of the great. I think actually now I'm going to go out on a limb and say it is the best Vietnam film.
Yeah, I think
although
so.
Vietnam looks really frigging cold in Full Metal Jacket because it's like, what was it, London Docklands or something?
Well, it's part of Dorset, part of London, and but one of the other visual things that really got to me in that film is the way that he visualizes insanity. It's like in the eyes of the actors with like The Shining, and also the character I can't remember his name, but the way that he is when he goes through his insanity and eventually kills the drill instructor. But it's just Kubrick's so good at doing that and making you feel, I definitely know he's insane now. And it's just, stylistically and character, brilliant.
It's very special. It is. I don't need to talk about. I love Full Metal Jacket. I had a poster on my wall at uni, all that kind of stuff, because it's just a very, very special film, because it's everything you've said, and it's also funny, and it, like you said,
it's very funny.
It's quotable, and it's devastating, and it's horrible, and it's it's so different for a Vietnam film, and it's you can see there are so many of them that are great. You can have Platoon, even things like Tigerland, which I think is great as well, and things like that. But Full Metal Jacket just gets them all because it's so different, and what by focusing on a different aspect of it all, kind of reveals more about it than any of the others do, I think. And so it is excellent. And if you haven't seen it, you should probably be ashamed.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for listening to 24 Lives Per Second, Guernsey's only film podcast. Don't forget to visit, like and share the podcast and the Guernsey Film Info page on Facebook, and let us know via the comments if you agree or disagree with anything you've heard here. Next time around, we will be reviewing Deep Blue Sea, which probably by the time the podcast is uploaded will have been shown by Cine Guernsey. We'll also be reviewing The Raid, which has been screened on the 10th of September. Got a plug in there. And also Total Recall and probably some other crap, which I can't remember at the moment. But thank you very much for listening.